Welcome this evening to Brucemore from your home. I hope you're comfortable. We plan to only take about 45 to 50 minutes of your evening, so you'll have plenty of time for the rest of your plans. We are here tonight to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the derecho from August 10 of 2020. We're just a few days late. We are at the 5-year anniversary of that most expensive thunderstorm in US history. And yet Brucemore is here, back stronger than ever. We'll take a look at how far we've come since the 2020 derecho, and we'll get a little bit of a glimpse of what yet is to come. And now I'm going to introduce our speaker for this evening. Flip that screen. There he is. David Jansen is a 7th-generation Iowan with over 30 years of experience in nonprofit leadership. He earned a BA in history from Dartmouth, an MA in history from Duquesne University, go Knights, and an MBA from the University of Iowa. He has served as executive director CEO at Brucemore since January of 2012. Prior, he served as vice president of the Detroit Historical Society, vice president of the Edsel and Eleanor Ford House, assistant director of Brucemore way back in the 90s, and as curator of the Smith McDowell House Museum in North Carolina. In 2019, David was honored with the Nonprofit Leadership Excellence Award by the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation. And in 2021, the Iowa Museum Association recognized David for his outstanding contribution to the museum field through visionary leadership. Under his direction, Brucemore has amassed regional, state, and national recognition for excellence in historic preservation, organizational culture, collaboration, programming, and economic impact. And now I will turn it over to him to continue this evening's presentation. Enjoy.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're very excited about sharing with you the progress we've made and reflecting back on the last 5 years. I have, as Katie has said, I've been at Brucemore since 2012. I served as assistant director in the 90s, and this place is very, very special to me, as it is to many of you on the call. Brucemore is just some basics for those of you who may not be as familiar. Brucemore is the only property owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation located in Iowa. We opened to the public in 1981, and since then we have hosted over 1 million people to the site, to the grounds. Iowa, it is an Iowa icon, and it is a national treasure. I will point out that this photograph was taken about 5 years before the storm, so that will give you something to compare to later in the show. The preservation mission of the estate is well known. Again, as a property that is owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, that is one of our primary responsibilities. Brucemore Incorporated preserves and shares the estate on behalf of the National Trust, but we operate independently as a nonprofit 501c3 organization with a local board and without funding from the National Trust, but we are charged with the responsibility and the honor of taking care of this place for the community. For future generations. Since 2013, we've invested over $10 million in envelope restoration, repairs, security, power, infrastructure, geothermal HVAC in the mansion, and we're very proud of that commitment. At the same time, the other end of that coin is for over 40 years, Brucemore has been a relevant part of the community. Preserving the estate is necessary for us to make an impact on people's lives. And conversely, we engage audiences as a part of our preservation strategy. The specific programs evolve as our audiences change, but the purpose remains the same. And fundamentally, the purpose of Brucemore, not just to preserve and not just to design programs, but to create a space for people to connect with the space, connect with a greater purpose, and to connect with each other. And you can see our programming really takes advantage of this landscape, and that's one of the differentiators for us. While the mansion and the massive lawn at First Avenue were created by Caroline Sinclair in 1886, the grounds as we know them today began with the second owners, George and Irene Douglas, in 1906. After trading homes with Caroline Sinclair, they purchased multiple lots of property to the south and to the east of the mansion to create the estate that they named Brucemore. Mrs. Douglas especially was fundamentally involved in the creation of the estate and creating a country estate, a country place, a space that idealized the idea of bucolic, self-sufficient estate, landed estate that existed in Europe and in the East Coast. They created that by amassing this 30, at that point, 33-acre estate. So the mansion and the First Avenue lawn is here on the map. This is the Douglas era, the early and the late Douglas era. This is at the peak of the property. And it reflects the ideals of the Prairie School of Landscape Architecture, which does not mean that they filled it with prairies. The Prairie School of Architecture, you'll know, is associated with Frank Lloyd Wright, taking advantage of the native topography. Think of Falling Waters, House on the Rock, things like that. The landscape component of that theory also leaned on the native species, the naturalistic topography in which the landscape was designed. So some of the tenets of that philosophy you see in Brucemore's design in the 19-teens, 1920s, naturalistic timber and trees and native plantings, and always a water element, that's sort of a pond that you might happen across as you were walking through a wooded area. They created that. This long axis lawn facing First Avenue is also typical of the design, usually on an east-west axis. For Brucemore, east-west is about this, because nothing in Cedar Rapids is a cardinal direction. Most importantly in the theory are these designed rooms, these exterior spaces, the garden. They have a paved tennis court, the pond and timber area, the night garden or light garden. These are specific rooms within the landscape that are designed to be distinct, but also give you glimpses of the other rooms beyond. That's what we see in the plan, and that's what you see in the implementation of the landscape. This is an aerial photograph from the peak of the Douglas era with the tennis court here, with the night garden here, this massive 300-yard hedgerow, three-arched hedgerow that separated some of these elements from the alfalfa field, from the neighborhood beyond. The guest house here, the swimming pool, the servants' village, all of these were designed en suite. They were designed very specifically as part of this landscape in adherence to those theories. The impact of the storm was massive. So just to revisit that briefly, August 10 of 2020 was a devastating storm. We had 45 minutes of sustained straight line winds of 80 miles per hour with gusts over 100 miles an hour. That tore through the Midwest, it tore through eastern Iowa and the southeast side of Cedar Rapids. And Brucemore was in the middle of that. Some of the worst winds and some of the worst damage was here in Cedar Rapids, predominantly in areas where there were old growth trees. And we had a lot of that. This photograph is actually one that I took when I arrived back on the property. I was in Iowa City at the time of the storm, and it took me 6 hours to get back in what should have been a 20-minute drive. And this is what I came across, was the staff just beginning to cut their way out. I will give you a couple of other images just to remind you. We lost 70% of our tree canopy, approximately 450 trees. We are still losing trees, significantly damaged by the storm. That doesn't count the shrubs and the small plantings that were lost. That loss of material altered the property significantly. Even in areas like the garden here, there were 4 massive ash trees that created shade on this end of the garden. With that gone, the plantings there have to be very different because they are exposed to sunlight all year round. $3 million of damage to all 8 buildings on site. as well as to fences. And this actually was taken about 3 weeks later. In the first week, it was physically impossible to drive a golf cart or a maintenance vehicle more than 50 yards. You couldn't drive a golf cart from one end of the property to the other. Outdoor statuary was largely spared. We had significant damage to the gates, to some of the piers and concrete structures that held the gates up. We did have damage to statuary, but it wasn't catastrophic. But even minor damage to century-old works of art, like this wonderful statue in the garden, require professional conservation. So it was extensive. This staff rallied, and to remind people who are in the neighborhood, rallied more or less alone in the first couple of weeks, stepping outside of their daytime jobs to help the grounds crew in the initial recovery. And if you remember, if you were here, there wasn't electricity or power to the city, the south. We got our power back about 11 days later, and it put a lot of strain on everybody in the community. What added to the misery of Brucemore was that everyone was experiencing it, so there wasn't a lot of outside help coming in. Where if it had been a localized damage, if it had been, heavens forbid, a fire or something, then the community would have rallied to help us. But the entire community was suffering through this, so we felt very much like we were on an island. And what we were left with over a year, almost 2 years of recovery and removal, was an estate that was almost unrecognizable to us. Neighboring houses that had been hidden from view for decades suddenly appeared to be very close. But in that trauma and in that sadness and in that uncertainty, we saw opportunity. And we committed to a massive restoration project as a board, as a staff, hoping that the community would come with us on this journey. It started with planning. We spent a year, almost 2 years, just recovering, cleaning up, removing debris, removing down trees. And we, meanwhile, took that time to plan, to be very thoughtful about how we were coming back from this storm. There was involvement in a charrette, a national charrette, to get some ideas about how we could come back. We involved Heidi Homan, a landscape architect at Iowa State University. One of her students, Brett Seelman, one of her former students, Brett Seelman of Seelman Landscape Architecture, was here in town and jumped into the spot with us as our landscape architect and did a brilliant job of helping us navigate some of the opportunities that we were facing. We came up with 4 guardrails that I want you to remember in planning this design. One is we wanted to honor the historic design of O.C. Simons, the Prairie School of Landscape Architecture I talked about, along with Irene Douglas and what the Douglas family installed. Second is we had to take into account the contemporary use of the property. Brucemore is used for things it was never designed to be used for. Concerts on the First Avenue lawn, over 1 million people visiting is not necessarily what the Douglas family had in mind. So we had to allow for that. We had to allow for our contemporary maintenance constraints. We have a relatively small buildings and grounds team, and we couldn't overwhelm them with the restoration, but also things that they needed to maintain. And then finally, we had to take into account the reality of climate change. That meant that our zone is changing. This is becoming a warmer zone. The plants that thrived here 100 years ago don't necessarily thrive here now, and they won't do well 50 years from now. So we had to take that into account. In addition, the frequency and severity of severe weather incidents are increasing dramatically because of climate change, and we had to look at storm-resistant cultivars as well. But finally, in addition to those 4 guardrails, we saw the opportunity to enhance the visitor experience. So these are the landscape phases that we have put in place. The planning is a little bit of an iterative process. We had our phases mapped out. We had to adjust on the fly based on availability, based on contractors, based on a number of factors. But this is how it has played out since 2020. 2020, 2021 largely was about continued clearing of the estate. In 2022, we focused on the timber, the very dense woodland area near our Linden Drive gate. 2023, we looked at the mock orange hedgerow, this long 300-yard, three-arched hedge that I mentioned before that had been lost to time. Then in 2024, focused on the night garden last year, this Juneberry hedge along the Linden and Crescent Drive area, the hemlocks near the servants' village, the yews near the formal garden, and then the formal alley of trees on the vehicular egress and on the pedestrian path here on either side of the First Avenue lawn. 2025, and this year, we are supplementing what went into the hedge and the night garden with a field of bladdernut shrubs. I just wanted to say that word. I think it's great. And then the west lawn of the mansion, the hemlocks and lilacs will be going in there in the fall, as well as some firs, some coniferous plantings on the First Avenue lawn that were true to the design and to the implementation. What's coming next in 26 to 28 would be focusing on the alfalfa field, continued west lawn work. We need to revise some of the formal garden and clean that up a little bit. The pond, the pool, there are a number of elements that we continue to work on in the years ahead. So I really want to share with you our pride and our excitement on the progress that we have made. 5 years after the storm, there's a lot to reflect on and to share. And we aren't finished, but the anniversary is a perfect time to think about that. And I'm going to walk you through some of the highlights of the work that our team, our architect, Brett Seelman, and some crucial contractors have all accomplished together. So let's start with the woodland. The woodland area near the Linden Drive gate is the entrance of our estate. This dense timber during the Douglas era included a gazebo, paved paths, but by 2020, it was simply a very dense wooded area. It had very thick understory. It was prone to invasive species like garlic mustard and barberry, and it was serving us only as a sight and sound barrier with the community. For those of you who live in the neighborhood, you'll notice that you can hear our music a little bit farther out than you could before, and that's part of the losing that timber and that buffer. And it served as a bit of a dumping ground for mulch and grass clippings and other sort of grounds products that could find a natural depository there in the timber. So it really wasn't accessible or usable by the public. Excuse me. It was just a background. So we began there. And the reason why we began there included it was the greatest safety concern. This was the winter. This photograph was taken the winter after the storm. You can see an awful lot of debris still on the ground and trees that still needed to come down. Again, if you were in the area, you knew that the availability of contractors, timber contractors, was sparse, and we had to do what we could with the contractors available. This is a massive amount of loss. And that meant there were hangers, there were widowmakers, large trees that had large limbs hanging, and we really wanted to deal with that quickly. The second reason was it was a very visible, very symbolic area. We wanted the community and our stakeholders and our neighbors to know we were going to invest in this and we were going to bring it back. The third reason was that density of loss. There were so many trees, it made sense to dig in there first. And then finally, we were working with the Monarch Research Project and their tree replacement program and received very generous donations from them of trees, specifically the sorts of trees that we needed, that our landscape architect called for. And that made it the perfect place to start for us. It began with what essentially became the most popular 2-week span in the last 5 years is when we had 2 herds of goats on the property to clean up the woodland area. Because of the loss of trees, the added sunlight, the grasses and the invasive species really flourished in the 2 years it took us to deal with the expanse of the property and turn our attention to restoration. So the first step in restoration was clearing that, and these goats were very popular. And it's also very pragmatic and a natural way to clear the understory. In 2 weeks, they covered the entire timber and removed everything we needed to remove. Their hooves are aerators, essentially, digging up the soil a little bit for us, and then their droppings added fertilizer. Just a perfect natural way to do it, and we had a lot of fun, and it became a very popular neighborhood attraction. With the 300 trees and shrubs and understory, we didn't want to just repopulate the timber. We wanted to deal with it in a way that would add the visitor benefit, would add it as an amenity for the people who used the estate. That means and meant laying out new paths, new pathways, planting it in a meticulous way so that we could create essentially a new attraction on site, so that we've transitioned this dense, inaccessible timber into a really wonderful nature walk that these pictures were just taken this week have a very intricate series of pathways that the staff is now maintaining. This entire timber was surrounded by deer fence for 3 years. Many of you, if you live in the neighborhood, saw buckets. The buckets were a good indication for people of how many new things had gone into the timber, but they were watering buckets. They had small holes in them to consistently water all of the material we put in place. And if you visit today, it looks wonderful. We're very excited about it, and it's only going to get better as these trees mature. We have about a 90% success rate with the things that we've put in. You can see in this photograph some of the wildflowers that we did scatter throughout. So we're very excited about how that turned out and how it's going to continue to evolve. The next element that we're very excited about is this 3-arched hedgerow. And I recall that I mentioned that in an earlier slide. This had been lost to time. The Douglas family maintained this estate in a very specific way. Their eldest daughter, Margaret Hall, and her husband, Howard Hall, when they inherited the property in 1937, didn't necessarily adhere to that plan. It was a very different time, a different era, a different family, and they planted or removed in ways that didn't stick to the landscape plan of her mother. They wanted to use the estate in a different way. It still reflects the design, but it was diluted a little bit. And then over time, volunteer plantings and other things emerged. So in a sense, we'd lost this hedge. There had been an effort to recreate it. In the 90s, it was good, but it was not exactly positioned where it had been positioned, and the plantings were a little less studied or researched. What we did is create that 300-yard hedgerow in that second year of restoration, the fourth year after the storm, with mock orange, a mock orange hedgerow that replicated those 3 arches based on GPS positioning and historic aerial photographs from the 30s and 40s. And it has created a really stunning backdrop and has given us the spine for the rest of the design. It was a critical feature, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to stay true to the topography and stay true to the design. And we learned, if you talk to our grounds team, we learned how perfect some of these elements line up with the topography, how this ridge line, this is actually a pretty severe slope that goes from the highest point of the estate here in the night garden down to the Linden and Crescent Drive in the public in the community, and this hedgerow was right on the crest of that. So a lot of things started to make sense to us that we didn't have to look at or research before. the storm. And they did very, very well, remembering that we went through a couple of years of drought since then, a couple of summers of drought. This hedgerow blossomed this spring, and it looks magnificent, and it's going to look even better in the years ahead. It will get to, it can get up to a 6 to 8 foot height. We are going to keep it managed and trimmed, but that provides a spine to the rest of the design work. It creates borders and a wall for multiple parts of these rooms that are throughout the estate and throughout the design. So we're very excited about that. And the success rate for the mock orange is almost 100%. So it's going great, despite the deer and despite the drought. So kudos to the grounds team. The next element that we're very excited about is the night garden. Again, the night garden was replanted in the 90s. It was a little bit smaller than the original. It took advantage. We knew where the stairs were for the night garden. Those had existed. They were surrounded by these massive and overgrown yews. And some our gardeners at the time, John Stepanek, initially laid out a version of the night garden without the benefit of some of the research we were able to do post-storm. And it was a wonderful job. But it needed, and there was an opportunity to do it even better, especially with how horrible the condition of the steps were in at that point. So this is David Morton, our curator of landscape, and you can see the white lines of the new design and how much different and offset and bigger the beds were in the original night garden versus what we had in place prior. So those of you who have known the property in the last 20 years will know that the night garden was there, but in our restoration post-storm, we are bringing it back in a very accurate way. And you can see in this photograph the mock orange hedgerow that's the last loop of that arched hedge, and it is the backdrop of this night garden element. And when these mature, they will be up to about this level, which will help with reclaim some of that sense of Brucemore being in the center of its own space, despite being in a very densely populated neighborhood. The stairs were a massive project, and kudos to the team that put this back together. The precision and the brickwork required a level of craftsmanship that we're very proud of. The contractor removed the brick, retained as much of the original brick as possible. We're able to supplement with brick that was matching from different stockpiles they had, but the removal allowed for us to see the original foundation base and replicate it, which gave us a good sense of how that bottom step was curved. That had been lost to time because that had all been overgrown and replaced and repaired over time. So it is restored with a great deal of accuracy and is sturdy, and I'm much more comfortable with people walking on it now. And today, this photograph was this summer. Things are starting to blossom. The idea of a night garden, of a white garden, of an evening garden, was that it was planted. It's a specialty garden that Mrs. Douglas had that was planted with white or light flowers and blooms that would be iridescent, would be illuminated at dusk at the end of the day. So at the end of your day, you're walking out to enjoy your space. Again, it's the highest part of the estate in topography. And it's a wonderful place. And again, once the shrubs reach their maturity, the mock orange, once the arborvitae and the hemlock and all of the understory, and then the flowers and plantings within the garden reach their maturity, it's just going to be a stunning place. And it's already become one of my favorite spaces. At the edge of that, this is the last art curve of that arched hedgerow of the mock orange hedgerow. This is the night garden that we were just visiting up on the top of that crest. This last arch finishes in this field of bladdernut shrubs, along with some of the trees and some of the other shrubs that had survived. And that creates it defines the end of that shrub row in a very clear way, and then opens the property up to opens the visitor up to experiencing the property by continuing to flow through past the night garden, past the edge of this row, and into the pond area and into the timber area. So it's very much planned to give you a sense of movement as a user. And then there were some other elements that we're equally proud of that are redefining the space. This is there were a massive plantings of yews that were overgrown. If you're familiar with the property, the pet cemetery is over here to the left, and this is the edge of the garden. Again, this is part of the process of recreating those rooms that are distinct from each other. So you need this barrier. The garden has its fence. Originally, it had a grape arbor across the entire front. It had a different fence line here, and then this hedgerow on the back gave the southwest border of the gardens its barrier. So we've been replacing that hedgerow, and then the massive hemlocks that were overgrown that shielded the person entering the estate in a vehicular way from the staff side, from the servants' quarters, from the servants' village. That hemlock treatment had been massively overgrown. It was inspiring. It was huge, but it really took a beating during the storm, and we had an awful lot of material in that hedgerow that wasn't going to make it, and those aren't necessarily plantings that you can just trim back and will come back. So we removed the entire element and replaced them with hemlocks that we will maintain at a manageable height in the way that O.C. Simons designed it and Mrs. Douglas and the Douglas family experienced it. From a quantitative point of view, we've put over 1,100 trees and shrubs in the ground since 2022. Some areas are very dense and some areas are not, but that's a massive amount of plant material that's gone in. Again, I mentioned the Monarch Research Project, Trees Forever, were wonderful in their generosity and donations of trees. We also bought trees, purchased trees because of donations from a number of people. So it's been fueled by help from the community. It's been fueled by organizations and individuals and corporations who wanted to go along with this journey and understood the significance, both materially and symbolically, of what we were doing. Some other little data points, we have put in over $570,000 in restoration work of the landscape in particular. And in between the spring of 2024 and June of 2025, we've documented 520 hours of watering on the part of our staff and volunteers. In 2 seasons of drought, the watering for younger plants and adolescent materials has been extremely time consuming and labor intensive. So again, kudos to that team. So I want to continue on and just share our pride, my pride in my colleagues and in the staff who have been working on your behalf, on behalf of the community, to make this happen. It began in the immediate aftermath of the storm. This photograph was the first week. We prioritized getting things off of the lane, getting material so that we could get emergency vehicles in and out of the property. And then the second priority was getting things off of buildings. All 7 historic structures suffered damage from the storm. This is Aaron Brewer, who used to be on our team, sort of leading that charge. You see Jessica Peel Austin, our curator of collections, dealing with those massive wrought iron gates that we had to drag from the gate over to the lawn to deal with that for a conservator. But everyone really jumped in, whether you were part of the Buildings and Grounds team or your host this evening, Katie Benedict's, going out to find us a new chainsaw. But the team really rallied, and I was very proud of that and the thought that went into it. And again, if you love Brucemore, I just want you to know that the staff, the colleagues who work with me, are very dedicated to that work. This is the current Buildings and Grounds team. We do have seasonal and part-time staff who help us in the thick of the summer and spring. But Greg, Scott, and I mentioned David Morton already, are the full-time staff who care for this estate and leading the charge. We have been augmented by contractor work, but a lot of this has been sort of falling on their back-breaking work, to be sure. So I want to make sure you all hear that this is a labor-intensive process, but it is a labor of love for all of us. I'd also want to thank the volunteers who have gone into this process with us. We have some neighbor. I think there's some neighbors who are watching right now, actually. We have some Days of Caring from United Way, some other corporations who donated time. This, I believe, is the Iowa Hawkeye football team came up and helped in the city and helped us. And then actually, this gentleman is John Myers, the CEO and executive director of the Indian Creek Nature Center, who just came over with a chainsaw and helped us cut one day. So we very much appreciate the way that people rallied and supported us. This is a breakdown of the funding. And I do want to mention the FEMA was really wonderful to work with, but it did take staff time to deal with that. It is a government agency, and there are some hoops to jump through, and there's some things to document, which, how much did you spend on that chainsaw sharpening? But they were very good at helping us with the debris removal to get some of that off. But the foundations, the corporations, the clubs and organizations, but the individual donors, this is what is really inspiring to think about for us as a staff. These are individuals, over $440,000 from individuals to help us do the work so far, and we're eternally grateful for that. We raised nearly $1 million from 700 individuals, corporations, government entities, and foundations. So thank you to all of those people who helped us get this far. And then finally, there are possibilities. There are things coming. We want to deal with the gardens in the year ahead. We want to. David Morton has some very clear plans on cleaning that up. The beds have creeped and they're a little misshapen and a little rough. It looks fantastic to me, but David is assured me that it is not up to his standards. So we are putting some effort on David and the team of seasonals, and Scott and Greg will be putting an awful lot of time into cleaning up the garden and improving that in the years ahead. We know the pond is a key feature. This is pre-derecho in the upper right corner. This is post-derecho in the left, and this is a few days ago. It is we are taking the pond in an incremental approach. We are going to invest in some muck-eating organisms and some ways to naturally clear out the debris that has gotten into the pond and sort of muddied the waters, literally. It is a healthier pond now, and that's a good thing, but the bad part of that is that it's been very receptive to some reeds and grasses, water grasses that have really started to thrive in the sunlight and with the cleaner pond. We are going to continue to deal with that in low-tech ways over the next few years, aiming toward making sure the pond is usable and making sure the pond is that sort of visible centerpiece in the estate. And then finally, I wanted to share some work. This is the alfalfa field, which is essentially the way that the Douglases used it for feed for their horses, but it has been essentially a large lawn on the Linden and Crescent Drive. We are hoping to implement a pollinator field there, some wildflowers, and like the timber, we want to create some paths and make it very usable and accessible for people. And so that's what's coming, and that we're very excited about that. There are a number of other little elements on a smaller scale that we are excited about putting into place. But those are some of the big glittery gems in our crown that we are proud of, that we have achieved and are excited about achieving in the near future. So, like with our preservation mission, this project won't end, it'll evolve. We've reestablished our baseline And our work as an historic site and cultural center requires that we not think of preservation just for our own sake, but for the generations to come. We, again, as I said, we know that the frequency and severity of these extreme weather events are increasing. And this will happen again to a cultural landscape in our country. We are, I would argue, the most significant cultural landscape in the Midwest. And our hope is that the lessons that we have been learning in our restoration will benefit other cultural landscapes, other historic sites, other private owners in the years and decades ahead. So I want to turn this back over to Katie and offer if there are any other questions or any things you'd like to explore in any greater detail. But again, thank you very much. I also want to mention that there is a matching gift opportunity going this month. We had an anonymous donor offer to match up to $5,000 in contributions to our landscape restoration, and that goes to the end of this month. And so if you are interested in able in helping with that, please, you can find a link to that on our website, which is illustrated here. In addition to that matching gift opportunity, there are other opportunities to support what we do operationally and programmatically. So we'd very much like to involve you in this because Brucemore is here for you. It is here because of you, and we're grateful and honored to be able to take care of that with you.
Thank you so much, David. This was such a lot of information in a very short amount of time, which I imagine might feel overwhelming for some people. I did just drop the link to the website that David has right here on his screen in the chat box if you're interested in going there. This is now the time where we have left for some questions and answers. And so while you're typing your questions in that chat box, I'm going to make David talk just a little bit more because one of the questions that we've been asked before that I think would be relevant here is, David, what is your most heartwarming moment from the last 5 years?
Wow. You warned me that you were not going to vet these questions with me. I think I compare that with the heartbreak in the first year as we were touring the site, as I was sharing the site with trustees or with the stakeholders, city leaders, and the cleanup was going so fast. You had the initial trauma of the storm, and then every month or so, I'd get out on a walk and walk somebody around, and I'd round a corner and see something else that had been taken out, and I was just reminded of the enormity of it and it just broke my heart every time. And the heartwarming part of that is in the last couple of years, seeing things come back. I think the trails in the Woodland area make me very happy, especially since it wasn't really a usable space before. But that night garden is just gorgeous, and it has become my favorite part of the property. And to know all of the work that's gone into recovering that makes it even more valuable. So I'd say that the timber trails and the night garden are really heartwarming for me.
You're not alone. Your mother is in the chat box with us, and that is her favorite place as well of the
She came on
nearby
her birthday.
states.
She came on her birthday and walked through. Yeah.
We also have some very heartwarming thank yous from some of our neighbors dropping into the chat, which we appreciate hearing that so much. The work
Thank
that we
you.
do is really for the community, and so hearing from you is really nice to have those moments with you. We did have a question, David. Will conversion of the alfalfa field to a pollinator plot run afoul of our National Register of Historic Places designation?
No. No, the National Register of Historic Places is a National Park Service program, and there are hundreds of thousands of National Register places around the United States. That focuses largely on structural preservation. So, and there's no real penalty. I mean, even if we were to, God forbid, put vinyl siding on the mansion, what it would be removing us from the list. So changing the land or restoring the landscape historically isn't an issue. And those adaptations, like adding a pollinator field instead of an alfalfa field, won't impact that at all? It's a good question. And then that's also distinct from being a property owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is a private nonprofit, not a government entity. So it gets a little confusing because they all use the same national nomenclature. But no, it is all in line. It's all very appropriate with preservation and restoration and rehabilitation ethics as outlined by the Secretary of the Interior standards for these things.
The other thing that I'll mention aligned with the National Register as well is that in 2020 and 2021,
Mm,
when our
yeah.
staff were, in addition to dealing with the derecho, we were in a pandemic, as I'm sure you all remember. We
Right.
utilized that time as well to update our National Register nomination. One of our wonderful colleagues who is no longer with us, Melissa, did a lot of legwork on that update. Originally, it just included the mansion, so it was very narrowly focused. The update included the rest of the buildings on the property, all of which are over 100 years old. So we're very proud of that work as well. David, I had a secondary question that was sent to me in a private message. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. I just want to add on to that. Not only did Melissa Porter add all of the other buildings, but we renamed the estate Caroline Sinclair Mansion because it had been erroneously named the Thomas Sinclair Mansion in the 1976 National Register application, but Thomas Sinclair had died 3 years before construction. So there's a little bit of misogyny there, perhaps, but we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to rename it in Mrs. Sinclair's honor, which was appropriate. So Melissa did a wonderful job of that as well.
She really did, and we appreciate it. It also opens up funding for us in different ways by opening that nomination up to the rest of the buildings. I do want to give a quick shout out to Becky, who just donated. Thank you so much, Becky. We appreciate it. We're going to double that donation with our anonymous donor this month, so that's even better. I had a private message, David, that came through with a question. The landscape is not the only project that we're working on. It hasn't been the only project that we've been working on in the last few years. Can you talk a little bit about what we're doing to the Servants Village right now?
Sure. Yeah, these things don't happen in a vacuum. We have turned our structural preservation focus to the Servants Village, which is comprised, well, the buildings in that village we are focused on include the Lord and Burnham Greenhouse. We needed to deal with the envelope, which is the outside structure, the fenestration, the doorways and the windows in the head house of the Lord and Burnham Greenhouse. The glass part of the greenhouse had been restored in 2011 and then 2011, 2012, and then a massive, I think it was a red oak fell on it during the storm. So we had to do that again. So we're turning our attention to the head house, the servants duplex. Our preservation architects at OPN once said that the duplex was being reclaimed by the earth, which was a pretty damning assessment. So we are finally dealing with the envelope of the duplex, the foundation, the basement, some HVAC upgrades, the roof, the back porches. And then finally, we'll turn our attention to the Squash Court Bookbindery, which had been turned into a staff apartment in the 1940s. And that envelope and foundation and system will be dealt with this year as well. So we should have that project, the Servants Village Restoration Project, should be finished in October, November. And then we'll turn our attention to some other buildings on site. Good question. Thank you. And
Yes,
in
we've
addition,
been.
by the way, in addition to that, our staff has continued to work very hard on the programming, element of our mission too. We're one of the heartwarming parts you asked me about heartwarming was just a few weeks after the derecho, we hosted the first live music, I think the first live outdoor music in the city and certainly on our site by bringing back cabaret in the courtyard in a very pandemic designed way with tables were separated. The drummer at one point started drumming on a tree stump. But that was very heartwarming as well. So in addition to the landscape and the historic preservation of the structures in the Servants Village, our program team has been cranking out programs and collaborations and partnerships at a very high level as well. So we have not slowed down.
So speaking of that, that leads to the next question that I have in my hopper here. The landscape work has also created opportunities for programs. in different spaces in different ways. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the landscape and also the preservation work gave us um, opportunities to explore different settings. So I know Tara Richards, our COO, has been very good at that in her tenure here of finding new ways to use the property. We hosted a show on the incline near the night garden. We have been staging shows in the Mansion Circle Drive of late. We just staged an original play in the garden written by Jason Alberti. That was presented last weekend to great acclaim. There have been some really wonderful moments in that, and we're going to continue that exploration because of the work going on to the Squash Court Bookbindery, the courtyard shows, our music in the courtyard, formerly known as Cabaret in the Courtyard, the very popular program for us because of the need to work in that area. We have to push that program to the amphitheater area, the stage where we host plays. So music in the courtyard will be showing up in the amphitheater instead of in the courtyard. So the topography, the changes in the topography, the changes in the tree line, and then the continued work on restoration and on structural preservation has forced us to be nimble, but honestly, that's what Brucemore has been good at for 40 years is being nimble in how we use the estate. Again, not designed to be used for, we had 1,100 people on the First Avenue lawn listening to blues a couple of weekends ago with the return of Bluesmore. Not designed for it, but we have figured out a way to do it in a good way, and we continue to do that.
Absolutely. That is who we are as a site. Adaptability is, I would say, one of our values as well as one of our skills. And that has been tested perhaps over the last 5 years more than it has been
Yeah.
perhaps in the past.
Uh-huh.
But we have done very well. And David, that is the last of the questions I've received. So I think we're in good time to say thank you to you for your time tonight, for presenting with us and sharing your knowledge. I know all of our participants enjoyed it. They've been commenting how wonderful the work that we've been doing is, and that's largely as a result of your leadership. So we do appreciate that from the staff and from our community. Thank you to everyone who attended tonight. We appreciate it. Like I said, this is being recorded and it will be posted online. We will send it out. So if you want to share it, please do so. We appreciate you coming very much. And that is the end of our presentation. I hope you all have a wonderful end of your Wednesday. And for me, it's the end of my week. So I will
Yeah.
be back next week for more joy here at Brucemore. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everybody.